All right, so today we're really going to dig into this whole corporate social responsibility thing.
CSR?
Yeah, CSR. I think a lot of people, think it's just companies trying to like polish up their image, but it's a lot more than that, right?
Well, absolutely. It's way more than just window dressing. It really gets to the heart of how companies operate
Yeah.
and how they interact with, well, everyone, really.
It's like everyone's watching now, right?
Yeah.
Investors, customers,
For sure.
even employees, they're all holding these businesses accountable.
You got it. And
Yeah.
that's really changing the game. Companies are realizing they can't just ignore these things anymore.
Right, it's not just good PR.
Exactly. It can actually make or break them.
Okay, so to really see how this is all playing out, we've got two totally different case studies lined up.
Okay, we love it.
We're going to be looking at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, a huge financial institution.
Right.
And then, get this, Yakult.
Yakult.
Yeah, the yogurt drink. It's actually kind of wild how these two, so different, show what CSR can really look like.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they're approaching it.
Me too. So before we jump into these examples, we should probably make sure we're all on the same page about what CSR actually is.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we hear the term tossed around, but what does it actually mean for a company to be, truly socially responsible?
It's got to be more than just following the law, right?
Right. It goes beyond just checking off legal boxes. CSR is about going above and beyond, exceeding those baseline requirements.
Okay.
It's about considering the well-being of your employees, your customers,
Makes sense.
the community you operate in,
Yeah.
and even the environment. It's like recognizing that your actions have ripple effects
Yeah.
and taking ownership of those impacts.
So a company could be legally in the clear, but still be kind of shady when it comes to the bigger picture.
Oh, yeah, definitely. They might be ticking all the legal boxes, but still fall short ethically when it comes to things like labor practices, environmental stuff, even how they engage with the community. That's where CSR comes in, pushing companies to think bigger than just the letter of the law.
I see. And you mentioned stakeholders, they're really the driving force behind this shift.
Totally. Companies are seeing that ignoring what their stakeholders care about, it's not just bad PR anymore. It can hit them where it hurts their profits.
Yeah, that'll get their attention.
Right. Consumers are much more likely to support brands that share their values these days. And investors are scrutinizing a company's ESG performance more and more.
ESG.
It's great.
Environmental, social, and governance, yeah.
Gotcha. So it sounds like strong CSR practices are becoming a real advantage for companies.
Absolutely. It's a competitive edge.
Right.
Companies that take CSR seriously, they often come across as more trustworthy, more innovative,
Right.
more sustainable, and that can attract customers, investors, even top talent. It's a win-win. Makes sense. Okay, so let's talk about the Commonwealth Bank of Australia.
All right.
I mean, they're huge, right?
Yeah.
So their approach to sustainability, it's got to have a massive impact.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, they're the biggest financial institution in Australia. Everything they do has these ripple effects throughout the entire economy.
Wow.
And they've really acknowledged that. They're working to make sustainability a core part of their strategy, not just some side project.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, a big focus for them is supporting Australia's transition to sustainable economy, right? They're thinking about the impact of their lending decisions, their investments, really factoring in things like climate risk when they're assessing loans.
So it's not just about reducing their own impact, it's about using their influence to change the whole system.
Exactly. They're thinking big picture. And to show how serious they are, they've set some pretty ambitious targets.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, for one, they've committed to cutting their own greenhouse gas emissions by a whopping 42% by 2030.
42%. That's huge, especially for a company that big. I mean,
Right. It's a massive undertaking, and it shows they're not messing around.
wow. Okay. Wow.
They've also pledged to put a massive $70 billion towards sustainable financing by 2030.
$70 billion.
Yeah. So that means they're directing their capital towards projects that are going to contribute to a more sustainable future, like renewable energy, energy efficiency, sustainable agriculture, things like that.
So it's not just about, writing checks. They're actually putting their money where their mouth is.
Exactly. And it shows that sustainability is becoming a core part of how they do business.
It's pretty impressive. I mean, the Commonwealth Bank's approach is definitely focused on making those big systemic changes. But what about a company that's, not a financial giant?
Right.
What about a company that you wouldn't necessarily think of as a sustainability leader?
Okay. I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, enter Yakult. Don't let those little bottles fool you. Their commitment to CSR runs deep.
Yakult. Huh. That's interesting. You don't always think of, a yogurt drink company as being on the forefront of sustainability.
I know, right? But they're doing some really cool stuff. They've basically woven sustainability into every part of their business.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So let's start with waste management. What makes them so special?
Well, they've got this incredible stat. 99.5% of their raw ingredients actually end up in the bottle.
Wait, what? So almost zero waste?
Pretty much. And they've got these amazing processes to thank for that. They're super precise with their fermentation. They're repurposing byproducts in creative ways.
Wow.
And they even use the leftover culture medium for agriculture.
That's amazing. They're not just reducing waste, they're like turning it into something valuable.
It's a perfect example of the circular economy in action. And it goes beyond just their ingredients. They're committing to recycling everything, like their paper products, even those iconic little bottles.
I love those little bottles. Okay, so the recycling pros.
Yep, they're all about resource optimization.
So what about energy? I mean, you got to use a lot of energy to make those little bottles of goodness.
They've actually implemented some really innovative energy-saving techniques. For instance, they use these things called heat exchange plates to heat liquids.
Heat exchange plates. Okay, we need a little more explanation on that.
So basically, it allows them to transfer heat from one process to another directly. It minimizes energy loss, kind of like using the waste heat from one process to power the next.
I see. It's like a domino effect of efficiency.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there. They've also got natural gas boilers, which are way cleaner than traditional ones, and they've ditched those harmful refrigerants from their cooling systems. They're thinking about the environmental impact of everything they do.
This is way more than just changing light bulbs, They're really systematically looking at every single thing.
Oh, yeah. They're committed.
And it's not just about the environment either. Yakult's really invested in taking care of their employees, too.
Oh, absolutely. Employee well-being is a big part of CSR, too.
So how are they walking the walk on that front?
Well, they have regular training programs to make sure employees know how to operate machinery safely and efficiently.
That's good.
And get this, they even do regular hearing checks for the production workers.
That's really thoughtful. I mean, those machines can be loud.
Right. It's a small detail, but it shows they actually care about their employees' health in the long run.
Exactly. Those little things can make a big difference.
And they don't stop with just their employees. They're super active in their community, too.
Okay, tell me about that. What are they doing?
Well, they've got these public education programs going on. They support health professionals with science communication.
Wow.
And they even offer these free tours of their factory so people can see their sustainable practices firsthand.
That's really cool. So they're thinking about their employees, the community, and the environment.
They're hitting all the bases. It's truly remarkable for a company of their size, really.
It's pretty inspiring. Okay, so we've got these two great case studies, right? Commonwealth Bank, this huge financial player, really trying to shift the whole system.
Right.
And then Yakult, showing that even a yogurt drink company can make a big impact.
Yeah.
What do you think are the most interesting similarities or differences between how they're approaching this whole CSR thing?
Well, the thing that strikes me is that despite being so different in, scale and what they actually do, they both share this deep commitment to sustainability and taking care of all their stakeholders.
So they're coming at it from different angles, but with the same underlying principles.
Exactly. They both understand that it's not enough to just follow the rules. They're going above and beyond to do what's right.
It's like they're speaking the same language, but with different accents.
I like that.
Yeah.
And it shows how adaptable CSR is. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. You got to tailor it to your own company's situation and values,
So the Commonwealth Bank, they're focusing on those big top-down changes because they have the power to do that. And Yakult, they're showing that even smaller companies can make a difference by focusing on their operations and being really engaged with their community.
Exactly. Both are proving that there's not just one right way to do CSR.
This has been so eye-opening. It's clear that this whole CSR thing, it's not static. It's changing all the time.
Oh, yeah. It's dynamic, constantly evolving.
And companies are finding all these new and creative ways to embrace it.
It's exciting.
But before we move on, I want to ask, what does all this mean for us, for the everyday people who interact with these companies?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. What's the takeaway for our listeners?
Well, that's something we're going to explore in part 2 of our deep dive. We'll be looking at how CSR is impacting consumer behavior, the whole transparency thing, and what challenges and opportunities lie ahead for businesses in this new world.
Ooh, can't wait. But for now, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about.
Okay.
Think of a company that you interact with regularly. Maybe a store you shop at or a service you use. What are their CSR practices? Do they even have any?
Right.
And how does that affect your perception of them? Would you be more likely to support a company that's walking the walk when it comes to social and environmental responsibility?
It's a good question to ask ourselves.
Because ultimately, we vote with our wallets.
Okay. Absolutely.
So take a moment to think about those companies you engage with. Are they living up to their promises?
And if you're not sure, do some research. A lot of companies publish sustainability reports or info about their CSR initiatives on their websites.
That's true. Knowledge is power. We'll be back soon with part 2, where we'll delve deeper into the consumer side of things and the whole transparency issue. Until then, stay curious. Welcome back to our deep dive into corporate social responsibility.
So in part 1, we talked about the whole idea of CSR, and we looked at those two really interesting examples.
The Commonwealth Bank and Yakult.
Yeah. Now, I kind of want to shift gears a little and think about things from the consumer's perspective. Makes sense. I mean, at the end of the day, consumers have a lot of power to influence how companies behave.
Totally. Every time we buy something, we're kind of saying, this is the kind of world I want to support. So the question is, are people actually factoring in CSR when they make those choices?
Well, there's more and more evidence that suggests they are, especially younger generations.
Really?
Yeah, studies show that people are thinking about a company's social and environmental track record before they buy something. Some people are even willing to pay more for products from companies that they see as doing good in the world.
So it's not just about finding the cheapest thing anymore.
Right. It's about aligning your spending with your values.
Okay, but can these individual choices really make a difference? I mean, one person buying something, it seems kind of small, right?
But think about it. If millions of people start making those choices, it adds up. And companies are noticing. They know that they need to adapt to these changing expectations or risk losing customers.
It's like for a long time, it felt like CSR was more about companies trying to avoid bad press. But now it seems like they're actually trying to connect with people on a deeper level, like appealing to their values.
Yeah, you're right. And this shift demands a whole new level of transparency from companies.
Because people can smell BS from a mile away, right?
Exactly. They can spot greenwashing in a second.
Okay, greenwashing, I've heard that term. But can you break it down for our listeners who might not know what it means?
Sure. Basically, greenwashing is when a company tries to make it look like they're doing all this great stuff for the environment or society, but they're not really changing their practices all that much.
So it's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.
Pretty much. It might look good on the surface, but it's not addressing the real issues.
So how can companies show that they're the real deal when it comes to CSR?
Well, transparency is key. Companies need to be open and honest about what they're doing, both the good and the bad. They got to share real data about their environmental impact, their social impact, show how they're actually trying to improve.
So it's not enough to just publish a fancy sustainability report once a year and call it a day.
Nope. It's got to be an ongoing conversation. They need to be proactively communicating with their stakeholders.
But isn't there a risk of information overload? I mean, if companies are throwing all this data at people, won't it just get overwhelming?
That's a good point. It's not just about dumping a bunch of numbers on people.
Right.
It's about making that information accessible and engaging. Companies need to find creative ways to present this stuff, Think of infographics, videos, maybe even interactive tools that make it easier for people to understand what they're doing.
So it's kind of like storytelling.
Exactly. Use stories and examples that people can connect with.
But how do we know that this is all more than just a marketing ploy?
Well, that's where accountability comes in. Companies need to be held responsible for the claims they make.
Right.
And that's where things like third-party certifications and standards can be really helpful.
It's like having a seal of approval from someone we trust.
Exactly. And consumers have a powerful tool at their disposal, asking questions.
Ooh, good point.
Don't be afraid to reach out to companies, engage with them on social media, demand more information about what they're actually doing.
So it's not just passively accepting what they're telling us. We can actually push them to do better.
Right. It's a two-way street. CSR is a collaboration between companies and their stakeholders, and that includes consumers.
I like that. So when consumers are engaged and companies are being transparent, it's a win-win for everyone, right?
Exactly. Consumers get to support businesses that align with their values, and companies benefit from a stronger reputation and more loyal customers.
Okay, this all sounds great in theory, but let's be real. There have got to be some challenges for companies when it comes to implementing and communicating their CSR initiatives.
Of course, there are always challenges. One of the big ones is the lack of standardization in the field of CSR.
What do you mean?
Well, there isn't really a universal framework for measuring CSR performance.
Oh, so it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges.
Exactly. It can be tough to compare companies across different industries and know who's really leading the pack.
And I bet there are some companies out there that are trying to game the system, right?
Oh, definitely. There's always a risk of companies cherry-picking data or focusing on certain aspects of sustainability while ignoring others.
So it's about making sure that CSR isn't just a box-ticking exercise, but a real, genuine commitment to doing better across the board.
Exactly. And another challenge is communicating all this complex information to consumers in a way that's clear and easy to understand.
Because, let's be honest, most people don't have time to read through these dense sustainability reports.
Right. Companies need to be creative and find ways to cut through the noise and tell their CSR story in a way that resonates with people.
So it's like a balancing act, right? They need to be transparent and provide detailed information, but they also need to make it engaging and accessible to the average person.
It's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. The companies that can figure this out will have a real advantage.
Because if they can communicate their message effectively, people will be more likely to support them.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. It's about moving beyond just talk and showing real action.
This whole CSR thing, it's really changing the way businesses operate.
Oh, yeah, it's not just a niche concern anymore. It's becoming a mainstream expectation.
And it's giving consumers more power to shape the world they want to see.
It's a dynamic and exciting landscape, and it'll be interesting to see how it continues to evolve.
I agree. Okay, so we've talked about the big picture, but now I want to bring it back to our two case studies. How are these trends playing out for the Commonwealth Bank and Yakult specifically? How are they navigating these complexities on the ground?
That's a great question, and it's something we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Ooh, can't wait.
We'll take a closer look at the specific strategies they're using to communicate their CSR initiatives, the challenges they're facing, and what we can learn from their experiences.
Sounds good. All right, welcome back to our deep dive on CSR. We've covered a lot of ground so far, from the basic ideas to the challenges, even how consumers are fitting into all this. But now I want to circle back to our two examples, the Commonwealth Bank of Australia and Yakult, and see how this stuff is actually playing out in the real world.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see how different companies, big or small, are tackling these issues.
Totally. So let's start with the Commonwealth Bank. We talked about their ambitious sustainability goals.
Right. They're really trying to make a difference.
Yeah. But how are they letting people know about all this? How are they communicating their efforts to their customers and the public?
Well, they're using a bunch of different ways to reach different people. Their website has a whole section dedicated to sustainability. It's really detailed, covers everything.
So they're not hiding anything,
Nope, they're being totally transparent.
which is good.
Right. They also publish these in-depth sustainability reports every year, packed with data and analysis.
So they're putting it all out there for anyone who wants to see it.
Exactly. And they're not just relying on those reports. They're using social media a lot to engage with people.
Oh, yeah. Social media is huge these days.
Right. They share stories about their initiatives, highlight customer success stories, even do Q&As with their sustainability experts.
So they're using it to educate people, not just market to them.
Exactly. It's a smart way to reach younger people who are more likely to be interested in this stuff.
Makes sense. And they're also teaming up with other groups like NGOs and government agencies.
Yeah, collaboration is key.
Right. To make a bigger impact.
Exactly. They realize that they can't do it alone.
So they're really leveraging their influence to try and change the whole system.
They're thinking big picture.
But I'm sure it's not always easy, right? I mean, there must be some challenges they face in trying to communicate all this.
Oh, yeah, definitely. One of the toughest things is managing everyone's expectations.
I bet. You've got investors, customers, employees, the community. Everyone wants something different.
Exactly. And they're all operating in this really complex and constantly changing world.
It's like walking a tightrope.
It is. They got to keep everyone happy while staying true to their own values and commitments.
Sounds tricky.
It is. They have to be really good at listening to feedback, adjusting their strategies, and always looking for ways to improve.
So it's a constant process.
Right. CSR isn't a finish line, it's a marathon.
I like that.
Oh.
Okay, so let's switch gears and talk about Yakult. We were all impressed with their commitment to sustainability in every aspect of their business.
Yeah, they're doing some really cool things.
So how are they getting the word out? How are they communicating their efforts to their customers?
Well, their approach is pretty different from the Commonwealth Bank, which makes sense because they're a much smaller company.
Mm.
They've actually turned their little yogurt bottles into like a mini billboards for their sustainability story.
Wait, what? Tell me more.
So right there on the label, they've got messages about their recycling efforts,
Oh, that's clever.
their local sourcing, and even their energy-saving techniques.
So you get a little sustainability lesson with every sip.
Exactly. It's a great way to reach people right when they're making a purchase decision.
I love that.
Mm.
And they're also using their website and social media to give people a peek behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm. They show you how they manage their waste, the energy-efficient equipment they use,
Yeah.
even their employee well-being programs.
So they're making it personal, showing the real people behind all these efforts.
Yeah, it makes it more relatable and builds trust.
And they're really embedded in their communities, right?
Oh, yeah. They do factory tours, participate in local events, sponsor community initiatives.
It's really cool to see that even a small company can have such a big impact on its community.
They're proving that size doesn't matter when it comes to making a difference.
But I bet there are some challenges for them too, right? Like, how do they measure and communicate their CSR performance in a meaningful way?
Yeah, one of the things they struggle with is actually quantifying the impact of all the good stuff they're doing.
I guess sometimes the most important things are hard to measure.
Right. But they're working on it. They're
Mhm.
tracking their waste reduction, energy use, employee satisfaction, all that.
They're getting those numbers.
Yep. They know that data is important.
It's like they're constantly trying to get better.
Exactly. It's a journey, not a destination.
So both the Commonwealth Bank and Yakult are showing that CSR can be done, even though they're doing it in totally different ways.
It's really inspiring to see how companies are stepping up and working to make the world a better place.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening. It's clear that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to CSR.
Mm-hmm.
It's about finding what works for each company and its stakeholders.
And being willing to adapt and change as the world changes around us.
So as we wrap up, what's the main takeaway for our listeners? What can they do to be more involved in this whole CSR movement?
Well, the most important thing is to remember that we all have a role to play. As consumers, we can choose to support companies that are doing good.
Right, vote with our wallets.
Exactly. As employees, we can push for more responsible practices within our own companies. And as citizens, we can support policies that encourage CSR.
So it's about using our voices and our choices to make a difference.
Right. Even small actions can add up to create real change.
That's a great message to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of corporate social responsibility.